Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Zach, and in today's video I'm going to be covering Deathground, which is probably a game you've already heard about if you're on this channel, but they just recently released a short gameplay teaser that actually goes and covers and shows some actual gameplay footage, which is awesome, and I wanted to cover that in today's video to talk about some of the criticisms that I've seen of the game so far and where I hope the game will go in the near future. The development team has promised an extended gameplay video in the future, but this is what we have to work with right now, and since it is some new content, I wanted to cover it and share it with the community. So this gameplay clip is about 2 minutes in length, but it is a solid 2-minute segment of gameplay. It's a collection of different clips. Most of the gameplay segments are probably 10 seconds in length on the longer side, so we don't get a super good idea of the actual gameplay because a longer clip will show that much better, but we do get a good idea of the overall gameplay and a lot of the elements of the gameplay. So we see the tracker a couple times in the trailer or the Kickstarter campaign video, whatever you want to call it. We did see like how the flare would work and things like that. They show that a little bit less here, but we do see some interaction with the environment, so how you can pick up things from the environment. You can replace fuses in a box to turn on a electrical panel. So we definitely see some of that. We see some of the beautiful scenes, like where they have the moonlight shooting through the treetops. We see that in real time, and that was a big concern, that a lot of this was pre-rendered, that it wasn't going to be able to look nearly as nice in real time. Honestly, my biggest concern with the game isn't really the graphics or anything. My personal biggest concern is the budget. So they have a goal of 80,000 British pounds, which is roughly equivalent to 100,000 USD. They do have a team of 9 people, so considering that the game will not be launching until September of next year, which is about 14 months away, once this campaign is successful, they will have to essentially pay the salaries of those 9 people, plus there's a couple additional team members, one of which is going to be working on the soundtrack. If the campaign isn't crazy successful and just barely meets its goal, my biggest concern is if they're going to be able to fully fund development and pay the salaries of all those people for that, period of time. So hopefully, and it is still very early in the campaign, so hopefully once they release their extended gameplay clip, that'll turn a lot of people that are kind of on the border, and the campaign will be wildly successful, so those budget concerns will kind of fade away. So that should wrap up my thoughts on some of the early criticisms, as well as my fears that would prevent the game from reaching the market. Now let's kind of switch gears and actually talk about the gameplay now that we have some actual gameplay footage to gauge off of. So one of the things that they talked about in the Kickstarter campaign was the game loop, which is essentially enter the PlayStation at spawn point, retrieve loot, reach a attraction point, and level up, and kind of repeat once again, enter PlayStation at spawn point, etc., etc. So that being said, with that bit of knowledge and actually watching some of this gameplay, my initial impressions were more along the lines of Alien Isolation, but with their statements that there isn't going to be a campaign mode and it's going to be less kind of story focused, I'm getting vibes that much more align with Left 4 Dead, which necessarily isn't a bad thing. With story not being really the focus, I think having kind of the Left 4 Dead type gameplay will kind of lead to it being more replayable. Just from these very little bit of clips, I do think that getting together with a couple friends is going to be the definitive way to play. They are saying that they are working hard and want to make both solo as well as cooperative modes enjoyable, but just from my kind of watching this gameplay, this is definitely something that I think is going to be more enjoyable with a group of friends, where you could actually utilize all 3 characters and their special abilities for kind of maximum enjoyment. But the game does look good, it does look fun, and I do think the game has plenty of potential. And since we're not even looking for early access being released until September of next year, or 14 months for development, and the closed beta that is available if you kind of back up some of the higher levels, that isn't expected to launch for a year from now. So the fact that we have a whole year of development does lend a lot of time for a lot of improvement for the game. Some of the areas that I definitely see could use some improvement are the dinosaurs, and they've kind of echoed those statements themselves. Some better animations and things like that would definitely be awesome. Definitely continuing to develop the AI. It would be insane to see the Raptors work together as a pack. Get that Jurassic Park 3 vibe where you hear the Raptors communicating. That would be very cool to actually experience in a game. As far as the gameplay goes, there is one final thing that I want to talk about, and that's what is actually included in the base game. And this is something that I haven't really seen actually covered much. So in the base game, there are the 3 character classes that you can play as. There are going to be 3 maps as well as 2 dinosaurs. And that's where my biggest concern comes from, at least from a gameplay perspective, is the fact that there will only be 2 dinosaurs in the base game. Now, there are some stretch goals kind of laid out in the campaign. These are only financial kind of markers at this point in time. There aren't any details associated with those stretch goals. So hopefully those will include more dinosaurs. And there is a segment on dinosaurs which is slightly misleading that shows a graphic that also shows the Compy and Allosaurus, which is slightly misleading. If you read the text underneath it, it says more dinosaurs will be added. I'm essentially paraphrasing that part. But essentially it says, as they reach additional funding goals, more dinosaurs will be added. So it looks like 2 of the first stretch goals, or, maybe not the first 2 stretch goals, but 2 of the earlier stretch goals would, at the very least, be a Compy and an Allosaurus to add a little bit of, mix into the game. And kind of going back to the Left 4 Dead comparison, and I don't want to dwell on that too much because it could be quite a bit different from Left 4 Dead. We haven't seen enough gameplay right now to have that definitive statement that it is going to play quite a bit like Left 4 Dead. But just going with that kind of comparison that I've already made, with Left 4 Dead, you have the generic zombies. Those are your persistent threat throughout the game. They're there to keep you moving. If you dwell at one place too long, the AI director will throw some base zombies at you, and they just keep the game moving and make it seem like there's really never a time to really just set at a spot, heal up, and have a breather. It keeps the game moving, especially at the higher difficulties. Now, with only 2 dinosaurs, I'm kind of worried right now, and maybe they can pull that off, but how they keep the game feeling fresh, especially if you play through these levels multiple different times. If your base dinosaur is Raptor, then you only really have one special dinosaur to mix in, which is going to be the T-Rex. And I could see that working for the first couple of times, but eventually I feel that it's going to get old. And maybe they have some tricks up their sleeves, but I would love to see the dinosaur roster continue to expand. That way we have a good mix, because I would love to see the Raptors being a much more formidable foe. Right now, they're not seeming to be super intelligent. Like, you're shining a flashlight on it, and it continues to continue walking. It doesn't look up at you and like, oh crap, I'm in trouble now. Anyways, like, if the Raptors had teamwork and some truly brilliant AI, that could be amazing. But then again, you don't want to have the Raptors being super persistent all the time, because if the Raptors are that persistent but also that intelligent, then it'll get kind of tiring at a certain point. So you want to have some like base zombie, in quotes, that will be a more persistent threat. Maybe it's a dumber type dinosaur. Maybe it's just something like the Compies. Compies are literally everywhere. They're always nipping at your heels, keeping you moving forward. They're easy to dispatch and get rid of, but they're kind of there to keep you moving and keep the game always going, to not have any lulls in action. And then Raptors are going to be on pretty much every level, and they're going to be more populous than like a T-Rex, for instance, but they're not literally your main dinosaur that you're fighting all the time or having to outmaneuver all the time. So until we get more gameplay, I'm really going to have to hold off on any further analysis, but the game does look very promising. And that's pretty much wraps up my thoughts on what we have seen so far as gameplay goes for Deathground. It is on Kickstarter. I think it lasts until like the first week in August, so you have plenty of time to back it, and hopefully we will be able to get an extended look at the gameplay here in the short term to get a better idea of how this game will actually play. But so far everything does look very promising, and the biggest question now is, since like they have their game loop kind of thought process for how the game will actually play, how replayable these levels actually are. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more great content, and until next time, Zach out.